Well, we haven't seen Kathy for a while, and when she first came to see us, Temperance Brim was already an established character. But tonight, oh joy.
That's not true. You were here right after you came from Hollywood, before that program started.
No, I'm not talking about the television. I'm talking about Deja Vu.
Yeah, wasn't I here for Deja Vu?
No. No, it published, if you remember, first in the UK and then in Canada. And so they didn't send you, I remember, they didn't send you here. So I think it was from book 2 on. Anyway, the program started, what book was that?
The first book, Deja Dead, came out in 97, and the program started in 2005.
Right. And we're going to just mention that the gentleman who's written this book that I'm giving away 2 copies of tonight, named Hart Hansen, is the guy that developed Bones for television, and now, inspired by Kathy, he's written this absolutely killer book, which I think is fabulous.
All those years I was in awe of, because he's the showrunner and he's a writer, and I was just in awe of how he could do that, and it turns out all those years he was in awe of me. I couldn't imagine how he could write a novel, and I kept saying, do it, try it, go ahead, try writing a novel. And so there it is. So we have to get a picture of me holding up Hart's book so I can send it to him or tweet it for him. So yeah, this comes out in August.
It does.
And it's good. It's a very fresh voice, I think.
I agree with you. I thought the voice was absolutely fabulous. A little bit of what happens is, shall we say, improbable, but the voice is just amazing. Anyway,
well, you wrote for television. Of course it's improbable.
Well, yeah, it's not like some of the... Did you see a summary of the summer movies? I couldn't make sense out of like the top 5 today in USA Today, and I thought there's not a single movie there that I've even been to see or area want to go to, except
one of
Wonder Woman.
One of our very own actors who left us, John Boyd. Hello, that's not right.
No.
Yeah. He played Sweets.
Yeah. Right.
He did Spider-Man.
Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Which just opened, right?
Yeah.
So,
Spider-Man, the home.
John Francis Daly.
John Francis Daly. What did I just say? John Boyd. He replaced him as.
John Boyd is a new one.
Yeah.
We miss Sweets.
Yeah. Aubrey.
Are you sad that Bones is closing after 12 seasons?
I am sad. We are closed. Well, we'll be around forever.
Right. No, I understand that.
It's hard to get away from us. We'll be on TNT and we'll be on. We're actually in every foreign territory in the world.
Are you really?
Yeah. Well,
Awesome.
At least at one point we were. Yes, it was very sad to go out there.
I don't think you like it.
I don't think it is either. I can't even hear me. Which is not a bad thing. It's very good.
Well, there was a guy testing him, and they both didn't work very well.
Well, take mine. I can talk louder. It isn't that.
I have no idea what I was saying. What was I saying?
We were talking about
Being sad. Being sad about
It
Bones
was very sad. I was out there for the filming of, and if you've ever seen the show, you probably don't want to talk about the show, you want to talk about books, but if you've ever seen the show, we have these wonderful sparkly sets where the forensic platform is up above and everything is shiny and gleaming. And when I went in for the filming of if you saw the finale, it was all destroyed. It was all charred and exploded, and it was fragmentary. I had no idea how many bones we had stored away, and everything was just a disaster because there'd been an explosion. So that was a bit of a jolt, and then everybody was very emotional. Everybody got up and gave talks, and and then the wrap party the next night was just awful. Lots of crying, lots of hugging. Oh yeah, we were a family for almost 13 years. We kind of fun.
Yeah. How long was Star Trek? It only had, like 2 seasons or 3 or something like that, and then it's been around since I was middle-aged. So, wonderful. My point was, before we talked about Bones, that we haven't had a chance to talk to you about designing or creating a character, and so now we have a chance here with Sunday Night to talk about how you went about it. What went into it?
Oh, first of all, I was very resistant to the idea. My publisher, I switched publishers 2 books back.
I thought it was 3, but maybe it's 2.
I don't know. Anyway, and they said, why don't you think about writing an off-series book? And my knee-jerk reaction was, no, I don't want to do that. I've spent all this time developing this character. People like the character. No. But then I realized I was thinking about it a lot. And I realized because I was thinking about it, I was already beginning to create the new character. So before I knew it, I had committed in my mind to doing the new character. And it was very stimulating because when you write a continuing character series, you have your cast, your core cast of Ryan and Brennan and Skinny Slidell and the daughter and her mother. So you created people and you've got facts, and I would constantly be going back to check facts. You know, did she have blue eyes or green eyes, and how old was he, and did I kill him? Is he still alive? So in creating a new character, you didn't have to worry about that. You could just make it up as you went along. So that part, I really did enjoy that part.
She's a terrific character. Let me ask you first, what is her name come from?
Her name, okay, her name is Sunday Night. Okay, did anybody read Death du Jour?
Yes.
My second book. That was the cult book. And if you remember back in the 90s, well, earlier than the 90s, we had Jonestown down in Guyana with Jim Jones. And then in the 90s, we had the Heaven's Gate people in San Diego, and we had the Solar Temple, which is what inspired me to write Death du Jour, because the first deaths in the Order of the Solar Temple took place in Quebec. That's the one where about 75 people killed themselves and each other, mainly in Switzerland and France. But the kickoff event was in Quebec because the leader of the group didn't feel they should do it and make the crossing. They were going to the planet Sirius, which isn't a planet, it's a star. But they couldn't do that until there was a child. The leader of the group controlled all reproduction in the group. And there was a child born to a couple without the leader's permission. So he considered that child the Antichrist. So the parents fled to Quebec. French speaking, makes sense. Fled to Quebec, and the leader of the group, Joe DeMambro, sent 2 assassins to kill the baby, kill the parents, then they set the house on fire and killed themselves. So those 5 victims came to our lab for autopsy. So while I didn't work on those autopsies, I was there, I was present, and I was very much in the middle of all of this going on concerning this cult. So it got me really interested in how do cults recruit, who's vulnerable to being recruited, how do they control the behavior, the thoughts of their members, even to the point of getting them to kill themselves or kill each other. So that's kind of the theme in Death du Jour. Now the cult in Death du Jour that our heroine, Temperance Brennan, is, tracking down, doesn't believe in names. You can call yourself anything you want. The cult doesn't have a name, and people don't have to have names. So when I created the character of Sunday Night, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting? What happens if a kid was raised in a doomsday cult, but managed to escape the doomsday cult? And that's what happens with Sunday Night. She was born on a Sunday, so they just called her Sunday. She has a brother. It was August, they called him August. So Sunday and August escape. They think they have time to rescue everybody, to call the authorities to stop this apocalyptic murder-suicide. They don't. They've been tricked. Everybody dies. They get busted almost immediately. They're like 15 years old. And the cop is drilling her. What's your name? What's your name, kid? What's your name? Sunday. Sunday what? Sunday. What's your name? Sunday. She hears a Neil Diamond song playing. Hot August night and the moon hanging down, or the leaves hanging down, something's hanging down. She hears night, so she says night. My name is Sunday Night, and that's where her name comes from.
Wow. Oh, wow. Tremendous story. What happens, too, to children if their parents are part of this cult and willing to kill them? It would be a life-scarring event.
Well, of course. I mean, and that's why the heroine, Sunday Night, is a bit damaged. She's got a lot of baggage. She and her brother are the only 2 that survived. Not only did they survive, they failed to stop all of this taking place. They failed to save the others. So she does have issues.
So she becomes the foster child, and not an easy foster child.
She's not an easy person. She wasn't an easy child, and she's not an easy adult. she is actually kind of fostered by the cop that busted them in Charleston, South Carolina, which is where I live part of the time. So when she does not follow rules well at all. She is not disciplined, and she does not kowtow or follow authority. So she drops out of high school, but she gets busted one day. And her foster father, a former cop, says to her, okay, you're putting on a uniform. You're either going to jail or you're going in the military. So she joins the Marines. She does pretty well. She re-ups, so she does 2 hitches in the Marines. But then she leaves with an administrative discharge. It's not an honorable discharge, but it's not a dishonorable discharge. It's not a medical discharge. We don't really know what happened, but it probably has to do with the fact that she really doesn't follow rules properly. Then she becomes a cop. She's got a lot of skills. She did some very special, I won't go into it, very special types of investigative activities in the military. She becomes a cop, but she gets injured. She loses partial sight in one eye. She's given the choice, take a desk job or retire. She's not going to be good at a desk job, so she's retired from that. So when we meet Sunday night, in the opening chapter, she's kind of given up on the world. She's been living alone for about 6 years on a place called Goat Island, which is just off one of the barrier islands. It's an island off one of the barrier islands near Charleston, South Carolina. There's no ferry. There's no way to get out there unless you have a boat of your own. There's one road that runs along the island. There's just not much out there. So that's where she's living, and she's been living there for about 6 years, pretty much done with the world.
Wow, that's a great place to be there, isn't it? And I asked the question about the fostering because I really think that her foster father, the cop, is a fascinating character, and he has not given up on her entirely.
Yeah, his name is Beau. Beaumont. His last name is Beaumont, so they call him Beau, of course, because it's Charleston. That's what we do. A very wealthy woman in Charleston, in one of the old, I don't know if you've ever visited there, but it's a beautiful old town. Lots of hanging Spanish moss and ghosts and pirate lore and old cobblestone streets and carriages with horses and things like that. Well, I mean, they're for tourists, but people don't drive around in them to get around. But that I know of. But there's a wealthy old woman there, and her daughter and her grandson were killed in a terrorist attack at a Jewish girls' school, blown up, bombing. And her granddaughter disappeared. So she doesn't know what happened to her granddaughter. FBI couldn't find her, cops couldn't find her. It happened in Chicago. So Beau persuades Sunday to try to come out of seclusion and try to find this young girl because there's a good possibility she's been taken by a cult.
I love the way you use the word persuade. I would have said challenge.
Okay.
Just the way, I mean, there's no way he can actually persuade her, but he pushes at her and challenges at her, and of course, she doesn't want to do it. It takes her a little while to kind of, it's sort of like you creating the character. That was a very interesting description.
But he pulled all the right triggers.
Right.
Yeah.
And eventually,
right
she decides to take this assignment and meets this older woman. And now we do the thing that I like best. You went to my hometown. I'm so excited. Chicago.
Yes, the story moves from Charleston to Chicago, where this bombing took place, and from Chicago to LA, to Venice Beach, and from Venice Beach to Washington, D.C. And as she's following the trail of this terrorist group, which is turning out not at all to be what she thought it was going to be, and then eventually to a city I won't reveal, but a very unusual place in the United States where the big climax takes place.
Right, which is, thrillers very, most often, not all the time, but most often move across a landscape. They take you to different places where different events happen as they're building towards a climax. And that's really fun because she can do that. She's not tied down to any jurisdiction. She's not an official officer of the law or, and I like that because she has an awful lot of freedom.
And that's really the point of the character is she doesn't do this because it's her job. She's not a PI, she's not a cop, She's not a forensic scientist. She does it because she feels personally compelled to try to help this young girl. If this young girl is in the same situation she was in as a child, she does it because she's personally pulled to help her.
Although there's a significant monetary payoff should she do this. Part of her negotiation with the older lady is that there's a big reward if she's able to find. And that made me wonder because it's always been a question when you have an amateur or semi-professional sleuth or something. What do they live on? Does she get some sort of military stipend so she's not rich, but she's at least got maintenance money?
Yeah, well, not so much from the military, but she's got a pension from the police because she did get injured. Right. She and her brother, when they escaped, they also found, it was like the Solar Temple had very wealthy members who part of membership in the cult was to turn over all your worldly goods.
Yeah.
So they had a lot of money. So she and her brother discover money, and they have, when they left, have taken some with them. So they have their own means, and her brother, Gus, has invested it well. He's kind of we don't really know what Gus does. He owns a marina, but we don't really know everything Gus does. He has very easy access to guns, and that's one of the ways Sunday Night differs from Temperance Brennan. There are many ways they differ, but Sunday Night really likes guns, and she's really good with guns.
Very good guns, because if you're doing guns, you've got to be good with guns, or your readers will crucify you.
This is true. I'm really anti-guns. I'm very opposed to guns. If anyone follows me on Twitter, I'm annoyingly anti-gun. However, I have shot guns at the FBI Academy, and I found it disturbingly fun. Yeah, I kind of get it, but I don't own a gun.
But you have access to people who know about guns and other stuff. So, I mean, I think over the years, listening to thriller writers, I have learned that the thing that they most often get unfavorable feedback for, is if they get done things wrong. I mean,
don't put a safety
you
on
could be
it.
a sloppy stabber, or you could decapitate somebody with poor technique or whatever. But if you got your gun wrong, it's Stephen Hunter is here on a regular basis, so we hear a lot about guns from Stephen. In fact, once we had a shootout in the parking lot. Seriously, for Stephen, we had to get a gun permit from the city of Scottsdale for us to go outside and shoot blanks at balloons in the parking lot. It was really an interesting endeavor, but people enjoy it.
It's inexplicably fun to shoot.
Maybe it's like fireworks. You just like the big bang.
Maybe, and I have I'm pretty good with handguns, but with long guns, even the instructor at the FBI Academy gave up on me because I have a dominant left eye, but I'm right-handed. So I had this cross thing going, and I'm not good with long guns.
So, this was originally presented to me 2 nights as a standalone or a one-off, but as I talk to you, it's not clear to me that you're going to want to spend more time with Cindy.
Well, I like her. I mean, I could see where, as you read the book, she's changed. She's a changed person at the end. I mean, she's not what we call normal. She's not going to top your party list of people to invite. But she has changed, and I think she's found it very gratifying to be able to help. Things may not come out the way she hoped, but she feels gratified to have been able to contribute to resolving the situation. So I could see her maybe taking very specialized investigative work like that.
And there's some things that you haven't fully explored, like your brother,
Yes.
So there's plenty of material there for. But meantime, what is going to happen to Tempe?
Well, I'm well along. If anyone speaks to my publisher, I'm well along.
They might be watching at this very moment.
I'm well along. I'm on chapter 25. I'm on chapter 10 of the next Temperance Brennan book. Yeah. So, come on, you're gonna like Sunday Night. She has a pet squirrel. So, that's not really a pet. It's a squirrel. It's more of a symbiote. His name is Bob. And it's more of a symbiotic relationship with the squirrel.
I think what you're hearing is that they're not unhappy with Sunday. They just don't want to lose Tempe, right?
No, Tempe will be back. Tempe will be back. What do I say about the next book? Let me think about that, because I'm only on chapter 7.
Fairly underway.
Somebody gets killed, and well, Tammy's in a bad place herself in the next book. Because did any of you read the Bone collection, this collection of short stories? Yeah, and in the book, the short story called First Bones, Tim Larrabee is murdered. I know. So she has a new boss. And the boss was a fast hire out of Raleigh because they really needed to get a pathologist in Charlotte. And it turns out that she and Tempe have history, and it's not good history. Tempe was very critical of this woman pathologist because she gave an interview in which she revealed personal information about a child who'd been murdered. And Tempe was quite outspoken in her criticism. Well, this woman is now Tempe's boss in Charlotte, and she's not calling her in to consult on anything. So Tempe gets involved in a situation. I can tell you that. A body turns up. We have a problem in North Carolina with feral hogs. Picture that. Body, feral hogs.
Lunch.
Yeah. So the body is not easily identified. And yet this medical examiner does not call her in on it. And Tempe is sure that the medical examiner is making some mistakes with regard to evaluating what she thinks of as the faceless man. He has no hands left, he has no face. So she kind of tries to pursue the investigation of who is this man and what happened to him on her own, which is very different than just doing her, almost like Sunday night. So maybe there's a little holdover.
So Tempe, in theory, will still be going back and forth to Montreal. Is that becoming more difficult in the actual world for her to, or is it not a problem with some of the tightening up of travel and so forth?
Between U.S. and Canada?
Yeah.
No, I think that's still pretty easy.
Is it?
Yeah, you don't even need a visa to go to Canada. Just a passport. And a ticket.
So far. just mentioning it,
You know, a lot of Americans are going to Canada.
It's almost like going back to the end of the Vietnam or to the Vietnam War where people were moving. And also after our Revolutionary War, actually Canada got a huge influx of Americans who lived in this country, and when the British went home, they went to Canada, those who didn't support the revolution. It's easy for us to think now everybody was on our side, so to speak, but that wasn't the case. It's fascinating history. Are you still working back and forth across the border?
Yeah, I'm not doing as much casework as I was because for the last, 6 years, my son and I wrote a series, the viral series. So we did a young adult book every year. I did a short story most years. I did a screenplay for the show, and then I did a Tempest Brennan book. So that really, it's a pretty demanding schedule. So
keeping it up. I've always been stunned at how much work you actually get done.
He dumped me. I mean, the kid dumped me. 6 books, and then he signed his own contract. So,
okay, Mom.
So he released the first one, came out this March. It's called Nemesis. It's really good. I don't know if you have it here. Made the Times list, which is really hard for young adults. It's like a frozen list. And his second one is done and in. It's called Genesis, and that will be out next March, I think.
And what is your daughter doing? Because she's been writing too.
She has been doing more freelance writing. So she's working on a couple books, but nothing is finished yet. She's having babies.
Well, there's an interrupter right there.
Yeah.
Well, before I open it up to questions from the audience, I would like to thank our Facebook crowd for joining us. Miles, have you had any questions or anything that you would like to repeat? Nope, we're good? Okay. Anyway, thank you for joining us on Facebook. If you'd like to see the rest of it, please go to our live stream channel at poisonpen.com. Now, do you all have questions that you would like to ask Kathy? You're not even on camera.
Yeah.
Okay, so in your TV show Bones, the character Prince Brennan writes about Kathy Wright.
Yes.
Here. Was that your idea or?
That was the question is, in the show, we did a little flip around thing. And Temperance Brennan is a full-time forensic anthropologist by day, but by night she writes novels, and the main character in her novel is a fictional forensic anthropologist named Kathy Reichs. And that was the idea of Mr. Hart Hansen. Yeah, so we had a lot of fun with that. We did a number of episodes in which Tempe, she's not very smooth. The TV version of Tempe is not very smooth. So when she has to go on air or do interviews or do book tours, she, doesn't go particularly well for her. Do I bring the forensic anthropology into the new book with Sunday Night? Not as much. It's not a forensic science-driven book. It's more of a traditional legwork, gut instinct, and that's another way that Sunday Night differs from Tempe. Tempe's all cerebral. She's all logical, whereas Sunday Night is really more like Seeley Booth in many ways. She leads with her gut and her instincts, and it's more of an old-fashioned police investigative procedural in some ways. It's also that combined with kind of a psychological thriller. There are point of view switches in the book, and you'll see it's a little unclear who the other point of view is.
Tiffany had to wrestle with a few demons of her own over time, and this is a more upscale, if you will. Our character has more damaging issues than Tiffany has, but you can't really have a completely bland character, or it wouldn't be all that interesting to read about.
She's a bit paranoid. She doesn't keep a cell phone. She'll buy a burner phone, keep that for a little while, throw it away. When she's in Chicago, it's kind of fun if you know Chicago, she checks into the hotel that's being paid for by the old lady. But then she immediately leaves and checks out, and checks in every day a different hotel. Keeps moving. She doesn't have a permanent internet address, although she does access the World Wide Webs and uses it, but she uses encryption, and she's a little bit paranoid. Yeah.
So how does her adoptive father keep in touch with her? Did he just go out to the island? Does he know she's there? That's where she mostly lives?
He lives, Goat Island is not a long crossing. It'd be like the Intercoastal Waterway. So Bo lives on the Isle of Palms side, and then she lives directly across. So she has a boat. She leaves her car where his house is, and then she just makes the crossing. So she has a boat, he has a boat. So not many people come out to the island. Goat Island is not upmarket, let's put it that way. In fact, there are only 2 people that ever are allowed in her house, her brother and Bo.
Both of them have histories or are characters that you could explore in other books. I thought Bo was really fascinating, but there's only so much room in a story, for giving you some background and then telling the story. So by default, you always leave characters that there's more you can say about them, but not in this book, because unless it's going to be an 800-page book, and that's somewhat self-defeating.
Hearing you talk, I know you just did the matchup with the child, and this character sounds a little bit like Jack Reacher in some respects.
Well, in some ways, yeah. Now, she's fixed in place.
Right.
She does have a house, and there's Bob, of course. So she's not, he owns a toothbrush, right? That's it. And then he just throws away his clothes after,
He doesn't have time for the laundry in between bus trips.
Yeah, so she's a little more fixed in place in that way, whereas he wanders the world. She has just kind of left the world and stays out and goes out. But she's like Reacher in that she does have these skills. She has tracking skills, and she has skills with guns.
They both have them.
Yeah.
By the way, we have copies of Mashup that are signed by Kathy. Oh, okay. Kathy now, and also Diana Gabaldon, and there's the book plate if we haven't run out from Steve Barrett. And we do have some other authors who also have stories in it. Lisa Scottolini will be here in August, and trying to remember, Karen Slaughter's in it, right? Karen will be here back to back actually with Lisa Scottolini, August 14th and 15th. And so it's an interesting collection. I think the stories are terrific. I really, this was not the first of these kinds of books that, you might tell them what the whole purpose of it is for.
International Thriller Writers is we broke away from Mystery Writers of America some 11 years ago, something like
Actually, you started your own. It wasn't part of NWA ever.
that. Well, everybody, okay, we were in a meeting out here.
We were.
In
You were
Phoenix.
there at the
Mhm.
Belmar, right?
Mhm. And we were all sitting around whining about how mystery writers don't, MWA doesn't really recognize thriller writers, and thriller writers get shafted and blah, 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 whine, whine, whine. So that's what I tell my grandkids, we don't speak whinings here. So someone, I think it was
me.
Gail Lynn's, or you?
No,
or-
it was me. I'd had one drink too many, and I got really tired of listening to all this, and I said, I said, why don't you just start your own organization? And they said, oh, what a good idea.
I was there.
I was
Gail
forceful.
Lynn's was
Yeah,
there.
it was. Lee Child was there. Vince Glenn was still alive. He was there.
not-
Steve Hamilton was there. Yeah.
Anyway, so we started international, we digress. International Thriller Writers, ITW, which went from nothing to, I don't know, we've got like 18.
Huge.
Huge,
Yeah,
huge, just explosive.
It was one of the truly great ideas. It just, kind of came along at the right time. That's what happens when you
Humble.
drink around a group of writers. You just didn't know what will result in.
So, but another reason I think it's successful is they don't charge any dues. There's no fees for membership. So the way ITW makes expenses, it has enough money to do what we do, is through these anthologies. So this is the third or fourth anthology, I think. Third.
Well, the one before was
Face Off.
Face Off, and that was pairs of authors who brought their two characters together and wrote an interesting story. The one I remember most clearly was Jeffrey Deaver and John Sanford wrote the story together about, I hope it was Deaver, and I think it was Sanford. That was set in, I think, Nazi Germany or something. And it was really a terrific story, and there were various other. So this time they decided to take a male and a female pair.
A male and female writer and a male and female protagonist.
Right, and so there are 11 of them, and very interesting pairs. Val McDermott and Peter James, I think, are they the only Brits in it? I think they may be. Diana wrote one with Steve Berry. Kathy is with Lee Child. J.H. Ance wrote one with, I'm sorry.
It was like the prom.
Yeah.
This was everybody scrambling for their
Right,
date.
exactly, yeah. But the stories are really interesting, and the challenge of how you can make sense out of having two series characters, actually work the case together and make it believable and make it fun. I thought everybody overcame it really well. But as I listened to you talking about, Sunday and Reacher, obviously they were very good.
Temperance.
It was tempered.
It was Temperance and Reacher. Yeah.
Right.
So,
But they still were very good.
yeah. So, it was fun. It was really fun working with Lee. It was really easy working with Lee. I kind of dreaded doing this because I don't write with anybody else. My one experience writing with someone else was my son.
Don't you?
Yeah. And he's a litigator, he's a lawyer, so when we'd have our editorial meetings, discussing our artistic differences. But it was really easy and enjoyable and fun, and Lee was it was just so easy to work with him. I did the first few, we decided on a kind of an outline. Well, first of all, we decided, okay, and this was Lee's idea, we're going to end it with Brennan rescuing Reacher. Reverse the stereotypical gender situation. Great. So then we all went away for months and didn't do anything about it. And then it came time to actually write it. And we came up with an outline. And I did the first few chapters, and then I'd send them to Lee, and he'd do a few and send them to me, and then I'd do a few, send them back. And then when we had the whole thing, we wrote it in like 2 weeks. It was so easy.
Well, you'd already practiced writing short stories, right? Because you had your collection.
I guess,
I'm not
yeah.
sure a lot of people think short stories are easy, and they come easier than novels, but actually they're harder for almost all authors.
They have to be
Except
really
possibly
tight.
Jeffrey Deaver, who could write one a day, as far as I can work out.
I think it was good experience writing screenplays because it's the same thing. It has to be very straight, very direct. You can't go off into you have A stories and then some B stories and some C stories in a TV episode. But you can't go off into all kinds of other parallel stories and things like that.
Anyway, it's a super collection. Thank you for bringing it up. Anybody else have a question? This is, come on, group. This is like, I'm going to have to break out the champagne in the back or something. Yes, ma'am.
So have you just done forensic anthropology, or have you done actual archaeological work? And if so, where?
Have I just done forensic anthropology, or have I done archaeological work? I started out in bioarchaeology. That was my PhD dissertation. It was in the paleopathology and paleoepidemiology of two lower Illinois River Valley Hopewellian populations. Has anyone read that?
I could tell that title will stick in your mind even if you go into dementia. Very well practiced.
I think my mother read it, and my committee read it. But yeah, so I started out in bioarchaeology. I had no intention of doing forensics. But, and I use this, my actual experience of this, in writing the short story First Bones. Tempe's at her lab, she's at the university, two cops show up, a very young Slidell, and a very young, his partner. What was his partner's name? I killed him. And because Tempe's the bones lady out of the university, they've discovered some bones and they want her to look at it. Well, she'd never done forensic work before. So that's how she gets pulled into it and away from archaeology, which is exactly how I got pulled into it and away from archaeology.
You should do some work out here now. You knew some people in the department here
Yeah.
know your work.
Yeah,
You know, that was what I was
archaeologists,
thinking of.
it's a small world.
Right. Gotcha.
With as many hats as you have, jobs, what's a typical day, week? I mean,
What's my typical day or week given so many jobs? I'm not doing much casework, as I said, because of the writing. So it's really a writing schedule now. And I try to get at it by about 8 o'clock. I'm not fire out at dawn, but I do try to get at it by 8 o'clock and put in at least till 3.
do you focus on one of the books, or?
Yes, I am very linear in the way I go about it. Unless I have to break away and there's something, yes, and the way I do the book is I start with chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. My daughter will, whatever her mood is, she will write, if she's in a happy mood, she'll write the love scene. And if she's in a sad mood, she'll write the death scene. And I'm going, that is so wrong. So yeah, I do an outline, more so with the Sunday night book because it was brand new. I outlined quite a bit of that. With Temperance Brennan, it's more of a free flow. I outline the first 8 chapters, and then as I write the chapter, I go back and add it to the outline, so I have the working structure, the infrastructure, if you will. Does that answer your question? Yeah, and then I keep, that part's boring, the actual mechanics of it. I keep each chapter as a separate file. So when I start working that day, I go to the beginning of the chapter, and I edit till I get to where I left off, which brings me up to where I left off. So the beginnings of my chapters are pretty slick. They've been edited a lot. The ends so that's my process. I work at a computer, obviously. Everybody works now on a computer. Right? Does everybody still?
Some people still write by hand, but at some point it has to be converted to a digital file because publishers don't accept, handwritten documents anymore. And often they edit online, which I think might explain why there's some really bad editing going on out there. I find that I have to print out, for me to edit, I have to do it on paper, so they send in their files and we print them out and I take them home and I write all over them and then I send them back and somebody, it's just the way your mind works, I guess.
I remember P.D. James said to me once, she has an old typewriter, she worked on a typewriter, and she said, and then I give it to a young man who puts it on something called a disc.
You know what, it worked for her. She was still writing when she died at 90, whatever she was, so it was a great way to work. Your thing about your story about your daughter reminds me years ago, a romance writer who will remain nameless and I were probably in a bar once again, although I don't agree. Honestly, I really don't. And I said to her, no, I'm serious, I don't. And I said to her, so she wrote these really great steamy sex scenes. I mean, fabulous, you know. And I said to her, like, how do you do that? And she said, well, I just have a lot to drink, and then I just write a whole lot, and then when I need it, I go and take some of it, and I put it in the book. And I thought, there you go, you know. Maybe she actually behaved in other ways as well, and then used that experience. But I mean, it was interesting. It was so she had a whole like file, you know, called sex, and then when she needed it, she could. If she was in a sober mood or it was morning and it was coffee time or something, she could just. So I guess, you know, we all work differently, but that struck me as a good way to go about it.
Field research.
Exactly. Right. Yes, ma'am.
How often did you get to be on the TV show?
I only appear. How often did I appear on the TV show? I only appeared once.
Only once, was it? I thought it was more often than that, but
And I
remember.
really didn't want to do it, and this guy could sing.
He was a terrible man.
We loved it, though.
I love him dearly. He's the sweetest man ever. He's Canadian, so he's really polite. But he kept saying, you gotta do it. And I kept saying, I really don't want to do it. And finally he said, well, I'll write a part for you, and if you don't want to do it, we'll cast it. And I said, fine, but I'm not going to do it. He said, David Duchovny's directing. I said, I'm there.
He knew how to push your button, didn't he?
So it was season 2. It's an episode called Judas on a Pole. It was the episode where Zach finally got his PhD. And I'm one of the stern professors. It opens up with the camera pans up, and there's poor Zach sitting there looking terrified. And I'm on the panel with his professors.
How was the science in the show? I'm trying to remember. We talked about it a long time ago.
The science in the show was reasonable, plausible. That was one of my jobs. I read every script. We pushed the envelope, obviously. It's television, so you take a few liberties. We did not do anything ridiculously crazy like DNA in 22 minutes or something like that. But anything we used, any terminology that was used, any of that was legit, was real.
Well, that's really...
Now, she was really, really good. I mean, she could take a toe bone and reconstruct. So that's pushing it a little bit.
Do you think you set a standard for other shows?
I hope we did. We did something right. We were around 12 years. We were the longest running show in the history of Fox.
Right. No, I recognize
That is not true. The Simpsons. We were the longest running scripted drama.
12 years is really, a lifetime on television. And as you say, it will go on and on. It strikes me that Sunday would be an interesting character. And the thing that's good is if an author has once had successful filming of some sort, there's a tendency, by Hollywood or television, to go with that author again. So you've got a better chance of Sunday appearing on the screen than other writers might have.
We're in discussions.
Ooh. Well, yes.
I often wondered on the show when they would start rattling off all that scientific stuff, how many takes did it take for those actors to say all that in a row,
They probably hadn't chanted the title of her dissertation, several times to get it right.
It depended on who it was. If it was Hodgins, TJ was perfect. I mean, he was so good. If it was Michaela, not so good. A few more takes. But yeah, sometimes we had to do it more than once. But by season, and especially in the early seasons, but by the later seasons, after about 5 years, 6 years, they probably could have sat for their masters. They really were quite conversant, at least in the terminology.
I always thought Hodgins was very, very real with his bugs and birds and things.
He's also one of the nicest persons ever. Best hugger on the planet.
While Susan's in position, I want you to hold up this book because
I
we
could
are
remain in
definitely.
position.
I am going to stop.
This is the person behind the Poison Pen Twitter account right here, Susan.
Fully focus.
And would you send that to me, please? So I can
Well, we are going to, right, and we're going to give 2 of these away at the end, so we're not completely wasting your time. Yes, ma'am.
I'm actually going to major in forensic science next year.
I want to know, what is the hardest part of your job? As
The hardest
forensic
part of my job. Are you all enrolled and good to go?
I'm
Okay.
inspired.
Here's my advice to you. Majoring in forensic science is useful, but if you want to get hired by a lab, you need a skill. You need physics. You need forensic chemistry or microbiology. Don't just learn about forensic science. Acquire a skill.
Okay.
Osteology, physical anthropology, chemistry, whatever it happens to be. The hardest part about my job as a forensic anthropologist, gosh, that's a tough one. It doesn't bother me working on decomps. There's one thing I don't like. There's a type of maggot called cheese skippers, and they jump.
Show.
So you'll be working and they'll be jumping all over around you. I don't like that. And I don't like exhumations when there's a lot of adipose or tissue that has to be stripped down and cleaned off the bones. That's pretty nasty stuff.
I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a sort of spate, both in film and in books, about coroners recently, which is not the same as forensic anthropology. It's an earlier stage. But nonetheless, Jonathan and Jesse Kellerman will be here August 1st, and they have a coroner's investigator is going to be their lead detective in the Bay Area. And there's a new British television program you can see on Netflix called The Coroner. And to some degree, they have to do these kinds of things. So I'm wondering, if part of that could be ascribed to the success of Bones.
I don't know. There was it's almost obligatory now. Even your standard cop shows always give some lip service to the medical examiner. Coroners are pretty much obsolete in the U.S.
Are they?
I don't think there are very many. Some rural jurisdictions may still have coroners. Coroners, anybody can be a coroner. It's usually elective, and it's often like the local funeral home operator. Whereas a medical examiner has to have a medical degree and then usually an advanced degree in advanced certification in pathology. And beyond that in forensic pathology.
And that's not an elected position, obviously.
No, those are usually appointed positions. There may be some areas where there are still coroners, but they're really
Well, currently in Oakland, but I'll take a look at that because I'm pretty sure that this is a
Is that LA County? They may still call it a coroner, but now it's.
No, it's up in the Bay Area. I don't know. I'll check it out.
Yeah.
Did you usually like the way your main hero was portrayed in the TV program?
Did I like the way Temperance Brennan was portrayed in the TV program? I did, and I think of Book Tempe and TV Tempe, and they are different. Book Tempe was older, a little more polished than TV Tempe, but I think if you watch what Emily Deschanel did with that character, if you were to binge 12 years back to back, you would be amazed at the growth in that character and the evolution of that character. So I did like it. Yeah.
Also, how did you like the way Max Collins did the tie-in in the first book?
I'm sorry, how did I like?
How'd you like the way Max Collins did the first tie-in to
I forget that there are tie-in books, because those are based on, you didn't forget.
We did one. We did that one.
Yeah.
It had a cover and everything.
He's done a lot of tie-ins, some more successful than others. Probably his most successful one was the story of the five brothers in World War II, the name of which has totally gone out of my head.
Sullivan.
Sorry?
Sullivan? Wasn't it the Sullivan brothers?
I think it was, but that wasn't the name of the book. It was a movie. It was a very...
Saving Private
That was it, Saving Private Ryan, thank you. And I remembered that he did a tie-in for that. That's a whole different aspect of publishing. And I think it's kind of odd, that you had a movie based upon a literary, a character based on books or television, and then they turn those back into some other books. It always seems
He has a lot of fans, and he's being honored at the International Thriller
Oh, he's a lovely guy.
Writers Conference this year. I've never met him personally.
Well, he's great, and he has written a panoply of books. I mean, he may be the most versatile author in terms of the kinds of things that he has done. He reminds me of in the old days when guys like Donald Westlake and Larry Block wrote under female pseudonyms and other names for the pulps. You know, they were churning out all kinds of things for a variety of contracts and so forth, and you know, God bless them. They keep finding them. They outed Larry Block as some female author, and they recently found a Dorothy doll that was buried in a pulp, and Donald Westlake has suddenly had a new book that was, you know, so just never know. Actually, the most interesting thing is you don't know where any of that's going to. You sell your book to Hollywood, and then, or to television. I mean, you don't really get to control all of it.
Well,
sure.
you don't, but I think each author strikes their own deal. And part of my deal with Mr. Hansen was that I would have input. And
I remember you were more fortunate than some others.
Yeah.
But what I meant is you can't necessarily control what they then do for like licensing rights and so forth.
I don't know how that works. They get very specific rights to the character.
Right.
I don't think they, and then,
No, I was talking about merchandising.
okay.
There's all kinds of stuff that
Yes.
spins off from. Did any of you read about the Spider-Man partnership between Disney and Marvel? Right, and they split the rights. I mean, it was all. I think it was all written up in the Wall Street Journal that which of them got to make the choice, and which of them gets to do this, and all. And it's a partnership, and they worked out a way to split the revenue streams, so they could collaborate on the Spider-Man movie as a franchise. So there's a lot of creative stuff going on.
Well, and I remember when I first got my first contract, and I knew nothing about publishing commercially. There were theme park rights and action figure rights and all that kind of thing. And I thought, that's insane. But David Morrell, who invented Rambo, sold the rights to Rambo, I think I have this correct, for $90,000. But he said, at least you worry about me. Don't worry about me because I kept the action figure rights.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah,
Yes, that
so
is
those
what
can
happened.
be.
So does this mean we're gonna get Bones, or a Tom Cruise running, amusement park? I mean, that would be really interesting. I would totally sign up for that.
It would be a very interesting thing, and we've been fascinated watching the enormous amount of merchandise that has arisen from Outlander. And it's just amazing to me how it all works out. So anyway, on that note, since we're digressing, maybe we should talk about Mr. Hart's book for a moment and give away our copies. So if I were to yell at the staff up front, hello?
Or I could just tell you you want between 1 and 37.
Thank you. I needed to know the population of people. If you bought a copy of Two Nights, you should have you should have a numbered ticket therein. And so 2 of you are going to get to win a copy of The Driver. The author has agreed to autograph the books for us. I don't know if he's coming here yet, I'm hoping. But if not, he will sign them in California and send them over to us because I am truly crazy about this book. And I also ordered an impressive number, which no doubt got their attention. It always works. And thank you all for making it possible for us to do that. So Kathy, would you like to pick that number between 1 and 37 and we'll give it to that person?
How about 7?
That's you. Excellent.
007?
007.
Oh, thank you.
You are entirely
That's
awesome.
my birthday is 7/7.
Oh, there you are.
I got
Oh,
to
it's
do
just your birthday.
I got to do, yes it was, let's skip that. But I got to do a very cool thing, last summer I guess. I got to throw out a first pitch at a Yankees game. So they said, what number do you want on your jersey? I said, well, I want number 7. They said, no. I thought, okay, well, I want number 4. And they said, no, you didn't. So I ended up with 7/7. So I looked it up later, and it was some guy that they brought up for one of the games and sent him back down to the minor.
I was remembering, some of you might have been here when Kathy published her 10th book. We had a 10th anniversary party here in the store for it with rum cake. Remember Kathy's rum cake here in the valley? And I drove all the way to like Helen Gone to Glendale or somewhere and brought back rum. Do you remember that? It was really, that was really funny. You reminded me of it when you mentioned your birthday. All right, we will do this other book, and I will pick a number, and I think I will pick 29. Back there. Whoa. There you are. I was trying to pick a number that's never been called because I'm the one who listens to it all the time. Thank you so much. You know the most frequent number? 17. For whatever reason, 17 is the number that is most often called. So you guys can hustle when you come in here and figure it out. It's been wonderful to have Kathy back. I hope you'll give her a round of applause for